During the men's final trophy ceremony, the USTA's president, Brian Henline, said the US Open was the most brilliant 3 weeks of tennis in history. Well, Brian, I and countless other tennis fans beg to differ. Hey, my name is Christian Bassnight, and welcome to Christian's Court, where I cover tennis from all angles. If you haven't yet already, make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell so you're notified whenever I post more excellent tennis content like this. So we all know why we're here, for me to talk about why I didn't really care for this year's US Open. But before I get into what I didn't like about the tournament, I want to start positive and go over a bit of the highlights. First, Fan Week was another success. Fan Week is the week before the actual main draw tournament starts, where fans can come and watch qualifying matches, and the tournament has other festivities for the fans to be a part of, player on-court interviews in Ash, then the fans actually getting to watch their favorite players or some of their favorite players practice on Ash, Louis Armstrong, in addition to the other outside practice courts, and they had record attendance of that, so I heard that went fairly well, so great job. Kudos to US Open for that. They always have the best fan week. Then also in the actual tournament, Dan Evans and Karen Khachanov, they had an epic match. Evans pulled off an epic win, I believe, from 4-love down in the 5th set to come back and win the longest US Open match in history. The match lasted 5 hours and 35 minutes, and somehow Dan Evans managed to win his next match to advance to the 3rd round, I believe. Definitely them playing for 5.5 hours is not the most ideal. As far as putting more eyes on tennis as a whole, I think it was good, as it even made one of the highlights of SportsCenter, so I have to mention that. And then one of the most highly anticipated matches of the entire tournament between Frances Tiafoe and Ben Shelton, their 3rd round match, did indeed live up to the hype. They gave us an epic 5-setter. It was about a 4-hour-long match, and it was great. I think for me, that was the match of the tournament, so definitely that was a high. Karolina Muchova's redemption tournament after struggling with injury for the past year was definitely great to see. Her last tournament before going on that, I believe, 9-month-long hiatus was at last year's US Open, where she made the semifinals. And so for her to come through a tough draw where she beat the likes of Naomi Osaka, Potapova, she beat Jasmine Paolini as well en route to the semifinals, and she nearly won that semifinal match. But regardless of, her ending result, just her even making it this far is it was a great story in itself. And then overall, I thought that the women's semifinals and final were pretty good. I have very little complaints about that. I think they definitely delivered. There were also a few rising stars that did well, namely first Gabriel Diallo. I believe he is 22 years old, from Canada. He came through qualifying and progressed all the way to the 3rd round, pushing Tommy Paul. So I really enjoyed watching him. He played a great match against Arthur Fils. Brandon Nakashima, he made his second slam second week, beating the likes of Holger Rune and Musetti. Great run there. He ultimately fell to Zverev. Jakub Mensik, he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime in the 1st round, and really he should have progressed through to the 4th round. He choked a little bit in his match against Nuno Borges, but still great run from him. Then Jack Draper, of course, who progressed all the way to the semifinals. I'll talk more about him in a minute. Now, getting into the nitty gritty, the tennis was widely regarded as mid, and that's not just coming from me, by the way. I think that Carlos Alcaraz losing in the 2nd round was the single biggest loss for the entire men's tournament. Of course, he's probably arguably the most exciting men's player in the game right now, generally speaking, but him losing in the 2nd round, I think, really dampened the draw, especially in that top half. Jannik Sinner's the world number 1, and he, of course, was in the top half of the draw, and he has a considerable following in his own, but Alcaraz just has a different type of aura around him, and he simply has more star power. He's just more interesting overall, too. Compared to the bottom half, the top half of the draw, particularly on the men's side, too, was just very mid. It was such a dud. Like, I literally slept through a lot of the matches on the top half of the draw. I had to go back and watch them later because it was like, there's no need in me watching it. The matchups just weren't that great, and the matches didn't even deliver. They were very lopsided, and it just didn't give anything at all, to be honest. Now, Alcaraz was not playing his best tennis by any means, and he did deserve to lose, don't get me wrong, but I really felt like it would have been better if he lost to Jack Draper in the 3rd round. Botic van de Zandschulp definitely deserved the win. It was good for him that he was able to get that, but his little shine was very short-lived because he lost to Draper in that 3rd round in straight sets. Draper went on to make the semifinals, but he flew very much under the radar because he just did not be a top star or big name player, and he didn't even play a single compelling match en route to the Final Four stage. Jack has a very exciting game, and he has the potential to be a big star on the tour, not to mention the guy that's modeling on the side too. But there's no denying that his run to the semifinal definitely would have had more eyes on on him if he had beaten Carlos in round 3. More people would have known, oh, this is the guy that beat Alcaraz. More people would have had eyes on him instead of Botic van de Zandschulp basically stealing his thunder, beating him, and then only to lose the following round. Jack just steamrolled through to the semifinals. He didn't drop a set, and the only seed that he did play en route to the Final Four was Alex de Minaur. And de Minaur wasn't even 100%, to be honest, in this tournament. This was his first singles tournament since sustaining an injury in Wimbledon. And it's not Draper's fault. You got to beat who's in front of you. But definitely that draw opened up after Alcaraz and Sebastian Korda lost. And he took advantage of it. But I was not expecting him to just utterly dominate and only drop, 6 total games, for example, against Thomas Machac in the 4th round. Machac is a great player, but for him to not even show up, that simply was not good. It was just not a good look to have such a decisive 4th round match. That wasn't the only decisive 4th round match, by the way. I believe Nuno Borges only managed to win 4 games in his round of 16 match with Dino Medvedev, so that just exemplifies how mid the top half of the draw was. The most attention Jack got, of course, was in the semifinal, but mainly when he threw up during the match on court and refused to stop, which is, again, that's unfortunate that was perhaps one of the biggest things that we'll remember from him, that and his oversized purple shirt. I really do wish his run got more media coverage, because him making his very first slam semifinal is a big deal, but it definitely got overlooked. Novak Djokovic losing was also a bit of a blow to the tournament, and similar to Alcaraz, I feel like if Francis Tiafoe was the one to beat him instead of Alexei Popyrin, more people would have gone up for that. Popyrin, like Van de Zandschulp, after he got that big upset win, he lost in the very next round to Francis, and then Tiafoe went all the way to the semifinals. Unlike Draper, though, Francis already had decent attention, especially in the States, and I think he would have garnered even more attention and definitely more respect if he was the one to knock out Djokovic. More people would have followed him along the way to the semifinals. There were also a few good storylines that got cut short here. First, Danielle Collins. I know she's very polarizing, and love her, you hate her, and a lot of people, unfortunately, ragging on my girl lately after that incident with Iga at the Olympics. But still, regardless, it was her last Slam tournament before she retired. It would have been such a nice story to follow if she made a decent run, at least to the 4th round, where she probably would have ended up losing to Pegula. But still, I think her losing to Caroline Dolehide in the way that she did was very disappointing. She should have won that match. Even though people didn't really care for her, just the fact that her potentially going on another run, the haters would have tuned in. People would have been talking about her. So the fact that low-key we got robbed of that, Dolehide won, and then Dolehide ended up losing to Sarah Irani the next round, that should have never happened. Also, Ben Shelton, he lost pretty early in the 3rd round. I feel like he definitely could have gone on another deep run if he were in that Jack Draper section, perhaps. People love Ben Shelton, especially on TikTok. The girls, they've been making so many edits about Ben Shelton, and for him to lose in the 3rd round, Shelton's departure, really, it was kind of a missed opportunity in some sense of garnering more Gen Z viewers and getting them more tuned into the US Open. And then also Naomi Osaka, that's probably one of the biggest storylines that got cut short in this tournament. Mainly that outfit, her outfit alone got so many people talking. Both the Brat summer inspired lime outfit that she wore in her 1st round match against Yelena Ostapenko, and then she came out in a black version of it against Karolina Muchova, where she ultimately lost. Even her loss, it just could have given us more, because she was up 5-4, 40 love in the 2nd set, only to lose 6-3, 7-6. And even the tiebreak, I feel like she could have won. It was just disappointing, especially with this being her first time at the US Open, returning as the 2-time champion, her first time since 2022. Of course, she missed last year due to her recovering from pregnancy. So I feel like if she had given us a run, more eyes would have been on that top half of the draw as well. So that was a little bit disappointing. Now, despite Djokovic and Alcaraz losing, we did have some good 4th round men's matchups. We had Sinner versus Paul, and the first 2 sets of that match were good. They were both 2 tiebreak sets, and Paul definitely had opportunities to take at least one of those sets, but he didn't. He went 0 for 2, and then he ultimately got steamrolled in the 3rd set. That was disappointing. And then Taylor Fritz against Casper Ruud. Ruud didn't really play that great. Taylor played just good enough to beat him and get through in 4 sets, so nothing really memorable about that match. Then Rublev and Dimitrov, that was probably the most entertaining match. I believe it was the only 4th round men's match that did go 5 sets, but the quality of it really wasn't great. Neither guy played that well. Perhaps it was the nerves due to, at that point, Djokovic was out, and they knew it was a great opportunity in the bottom half for one of them to finally break through and make a Slam final, but I just wasn't really I wasn't a fan of that match, really. Then getting to the quarterfinals, Draper versus De Minaur was a dud. Then Sinner versus Medvedev was the most hyped quarterfinal because people considered that one to be the winner. Whoever would win that match would go on to win the tournament. Medvedev, though, he underperformed, and he possibly fumbled that one. I think he did have some slight openings in winning this match, perhaps, but just overall, the match just wasn't great. Neither man played good at the same time. Tiafoe Dimitrov had potential to be something good or great, perhaps, but Dimitrov's injury for sure ruined that. And then finally, Fritz versus Zverev, to me, was the only objectively good quarterfinal. You know, that's what a slam quarterfinal should be. It should be both guys are playing decent at the same exact time. Getting to the women in the quarterfinals there, Swiatek versus Pegula, there's some hype surrounding that, but that was a dud. And surprisingly, it was Iga who made it a bit of a dud with how poorly she came out and played. Then Paula Badosa versus Emma Navarro. Badosa had a 5-1 lead in the second set, so she really should have pushed that 1 to 3 sets. And I feel like that could have potentially been the match of the tournament, but Emma Navarro's 6-game streak ended that. Any hopes of that? Sabalenka versus Zhang was by far the biggest disappointment of all. Zhang was playing such great tennis in the tournament. She had beaten Anisimova. She got a win over, of course, Donna Vekic, which was probably arguably the women's match of the tournament, their 4th round encounter. Zhang ended up winning that one. She finished 2:15 a.m., which was the latest women's finish in U.S. Open history. There was some debate about that and why that even is the case. Why are we having players compete until 2 a.m.? And perhaps that late finish is why Zhang only managed to win 3 games against Sabalenka in the quarterfinal. But I really think it boils down to Zhang having some type of a mental block against Arena, and then 2, it just not being a great matchup for her. So for that one to finish 6-1, 6-2 was definitely not great at all. Our last quarterfinal, which is the most forgotten quarterfinal, is Karolina Muchova versus Beatriz Haddad-Maia. Beatriz Haddad-Maia even making the quarterfinals is a sneak to me, to be honest. Anna Kalinskaya, in my opinion, should have been there, even though Kalinskaya only won 4 games. I say this because Kalinskaya was leading 2-love, and it was deuce in the opening set, and she hit a drop shot, which really did bounce twice, and Haddad-Maia did not get it over, but the umpire made the wrong call, and despite VAR, them having a video replay system in play, the umpire still made the decision to award Haddad-Maia the point, which is not a good look at all, especially after we had that incident in Cincinnati with Felix being robbed by the umpire there against Jack Draper. It just wasn't a good look. And by the way, speaking of not good looks, of course, Yulia Putintseva and the whole ball girl thing wasn't great. I definitely think that Putintseva got a little bit too much backlash. People were calling her all types of names under the sun, and I knew that likely it wasn't. She didn't have an attitude necessarily, or she wasn't really trying to take anything out on the ball girl. She was more frustrated with herself, but bottom line, she could have handled the situation much better. Anyways, going back to Haddad-Maia, I really do believe that Elena Rybakina withdrawing from the tournament would have prevented Haddad-Maia from even going this far. Rybakina's out withdrawal definitely too was a low moment of the tournament because she cited injury or an unknown injury or whatever, undisclosed injury, but we really still don't know what happened, and there's still question marks surrounding that. There were red marks on her face when she gave her first match press conference after winning her opening round match against Destiny Aeva. So thoughts and prayers going on with her. I know she recently split with her longtime coach, Stefano Vukov, so we'll see what happens there. But then going back to the tennis, the Muchova Haddad-Maia quarterfinal match was a big dud as well. And it was weird because Muchova was struggling with her stomach in the second set, and then Haddad-Maia started, I guess, having a panic attack and getting emotional. It was just a whole mess. From the semifinals on, the women took it. The women's side was definitely far more entertaining, in my opinion, than the men's. Sabalenka and Navarro, that semifinal was entertaining, especially towards the end. And then Muchova Pegula was good, and it was an entertaining comeback from Jessie because I thought there was no way in God's green earth that she would come back, but she did it, and so props to her for that. The finals I thought was very entertaining as well. I was pleased with the finals between Sabalenka and Pegula, and in my opinion, it was the best women's slam final of 2024 for sure. To me, it was better in quality and overall entertainment value than Krejcikova and Paolini Wimbledon. On the men's side, Fritz Tiafoe was somewhat decent. There was a lot of hype surrounding that one, of course, because who will be the first American man to end the streak of, I believe, 15 years since an American men's singles finalist would be a singles finalist, slam singles finalist. Did it live up to the hype? I guess so. I mean, it went 5 sets, although the 5th set was underwhelming. Tiafoe went away there for sure. But the level of tennis we saw, I think it was good from Tiafoe for sure. I will stand 10 toes down on this, that Tiafoe was the better player for the first 3 sets. Fritz wasn't playing his best tennis, and he admitted this in the press conference. He was nervous, but ultimately nerves got the better of Tiafoe, which is why Fritz was able to kind of come out on top. Fritz is the better player, generally speaking, but in that match, I do think that Tiafoe was outplaying him for sure. A lot of centers matches could have been more entertaining, especially the semifinal and the final. Draper and Fritz both had opportunities to win sets, but neither man was actually able to. Sinner was not budging, giving credit to the Italian. He stepped it up, and he was definitely the best player. He used his experience and his champion instincts to come through there. But unfortunately, that is why his run to the title was not that exciting, because he didn't really run into any challenges at all. I was going to make a video about Jannik Sinner winning the title and, you know, breaking down that match, but I just wasn't compelled to. I was already tired and drained from all the countless other videos I had made throughout the US Open at that point. So I was like, I don't even have the energy to try to muster up something to talk about something I don't care about. Normally I can, but the tennis was so mid. I was too tired it just wasn't working. It wasn't going to happen. So talking about that now here, just giving it like a 30 seconds of my time, I thought overall the biggest takeaway is that we are now into the Sinner Alcaraz era. And I really don't see many people coming and consistently threatening them for slams. There will be players who will come through instead of Sinner and Alcaraz and win slams, but it won't happen very often. I just think there's a lack of pure talent. That's it. Like, it's a lack of pure talent. Zverev will be the closest, and I think he ultimately will come through and win a slam, but the biggest thing stopping him is his own self, I think, and his comparative lack of talent to Sinner and Alcaraz. But two, the mental thing with him trying to get over the hump. The more times he comes close and fails, the harder it will be for him to ultimately be successful and win a slam. Tsitsipas, I don't think he has the game right now, at least. I think Fritz and or Tiafoe can perhaps break through, especially if the draw opens up in one of these slams. Djokovic can win a slam, another slam or two, but I think time is winding down on him, especially with him being now 37, 38 years old, and the best of 5 format just not favoring the older guys. So just wrapping up my overall thoughts on the actual tennis, no matches really stood out to me as being for sure lock-ins for match of the year contenders. Shelton Tiafoe is the only one on the men's side that can maybe sneak its way onto the list. Fritz Zverev was good. I think Diallo Fils was a good one as well. I think the women's has some better options. Donna Vekic against Kim Wen-Jang, that match was good. Carolina Muchova Pegula semifinal was good. Paulina Andreescu, another one that was good in my opinion. And then Raducanu Kenin, the last 2 sets were pretty good too. So overall doubles, they had some more entertaining matches. And I think the biggest story on the double side was actually the mixed doubles and Taylor Townsend and Donald Young, the American duo, their run to the final. It was Donald Young's final ever professional tennis tournament, as he will be now retiring and going full-time on the pickleball tour. It was disappointing that they weren't able to have that fairy tale ending and win the title. They lost to Sarah Irani and her partner. So that was a little bit, anticlimactic, and another reason why the US Open was a letdown. Getting into why exactly the tennis was so mid, I think it comes down to it just simply being an Olympic year and the players being tired and burnt out. None of the men's singles medalists, Djokovic, Musetti, or Alcaraz, were made the second week, and that's very telling. Then on the women's side, Zhang and Swiatek, the gold and bronze medalists, they definitely fared better. They made the quarterfinals, but I just think the tennis season is just too long and grueling, and it's even worse now with most of the 1,000 tournaments being held over a 2-week span, and that's just a lot. The surface change didn't help matters at all either, going from clay at Roland Garros to grass for Wimbledon, and then back to clay for the Olympics, and then back to hard courts for the US Open swing. It was kind of a recipe for disaster. Taylor Fritz even said himself that he didn't feel like he played great tennis, and he made his first slam final. He felt like he played within himself and that he was solid, but he didn't feel like he needed to play exceptional tennis to even make the stage. And I feel like that's very telling. For players to make their maiden slam final, they should be playing great tennis, in my opinion. They should be playing probably the best tennis of their life. But for Taylor Fritz to say that he didn't feel like he needed to play his best tennis, it was solid, he coasted by, that shows you that the overall level, these guys aren't playing their best. Jannik Sinner didn't even play his best, yet he still kind of low-key cruised through to the title. So hopefully next year's US Open will be better. There will be no Olympics, so the players will hopefully be fresher, but just overall, I just wasn't really pleased at all with the level of tennis I saw, especially on the men's side. One thing I forgot to mention is that Jannik Sinner had the whole doping scandal thing heading into the U.S. Open, and I thought that would add an extra element of some type of drama or flair. But literally no one really talked about it that much. Like, it went untalked about for the most part. And at the end of the day, people just forgot or they just didn't care. That's not to say, oh, I wish more people talked about it, but I'm just saying, like, dang, like, even that didn't do anything and add more like excitement or any more elements to it for Sinner. Like, people just didn't really care. So that's also too why it was a little bit of a letdown, I guess. Like, the drama aspect of it wasn't even there with Sinner and the whole failed drug test thing. The tournament did prove, though, that tennis is on the rise in popularity at the moment, and it could be from the Challengers film starring Zendaya driving the hype. But for the first time, over 1 million people entered the grounds in the first 3 weeks of the tournament, including Fan Week. That's all fine and dandy, and while it's easy to boast these numbers, there have been complaints about the Billie Jean King National Tennis Center being too small to host the tens of thousands of fans that enter the turnstiles each day. Now, these fan numbers are an impressive feat, especially when you consider how much more expensive the tickets were for the Open compared to years past. Fans on X and Reddit complained about having to pay upwards of $200 and even $300 for simple grounds passes, which they only cost about $100 or even less in recent years prior. The nosebleeds on Arthur Ashe and Louis Armstrong are higher as well, and then overall just become less affordable and accessible for everyday tennis fans, and the tournament seems to be more catered to the white collar people and the ultra wealthy. Now, tennis is a wealthy sport, an expensive sport in itself, but it's still disappointing, and it wasn't always like this. Like, the grounds passes were always accessible for the fans, but now the grounds passes are costing an arm and a leg. The resellers play a role in this too, but it's hard to combat them when the resellers are on there trying to nab them within minutes of the tickets going on sale. I've also noticed that the U.S. Open, out of the all four slams, they seem to be the most focused on celebrities and trying to bolster celebrity appearance and stuff like that. They even have a whole blue carpet, which is live streamed sometimes on, I think, Louis Armstrong Stadium, and the fans get to see the different celebrities that walk on the blue carpet. And we had a lot of stars pop out at this U.S. Open, namely Taylor Swift, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Lewis Hamilton, Noah Lyles, Steph Curry, Serena, Raja Maria, and the list goes on and on and on. During the men's final, the U.S. Open social media made 7 posts on IG about Taylor Swift alone, and only 6 were about the final itself. I and quite a few other fans have noticed that the U.S. Open seems to be more geared towards highlighting the celebrities rather than the actual tennis and the athletes competing themselves. In addition to celebrities, the higher elite who can afford the tickets, plus the influencers, really aren't that invested or that interested in tennis itself, or they don't really care about who wins or who loses, and they don't really care. A lot of people were seen on their phones, just not really being interested, not really being engaged with it. And we could notice, even from home, I could listen and hear the crowd just they weren't as engaged. It was a blessing that Pegula and Fritz and Navarro went on the runs that they went on, because the crowd would not know who to cheer for. The crowd just wouldn't really care that much, in my opinion. And I'm not saying that those people and outsiders can't go and enjoy themselves at the U.S. Open. It's good to spread the game by letting the outsiders in and making it more mainstream, I feel. But I find a problem in people literally leaving during their 5th set of the Tiafoe-Fritz match. And Francis talked about in the press conference how he was hurt about that. People literally leaving during the match because Tiafoe, he got the majority of the crowd support because Tiafoe is more known by the mainstream. And a lot of people who were in the crowd weren't just tennis fans. They were more casual and they were more mainstream, and more of them knew Tiafoe. So they saw, oh, Tiafoe's not going to win this. Let's go, y'all. Let's go. There's no point of sticking around. And you could tell the atmosphere was a little bit weird in that match. Especially after the first set, it got kind of dead and the fans weren't really into it as much, even when Tiafoe was winning, which is kind of bizarre. I get that the U.S. Open was trying to capitalize on this current mainstream surge in tennis, which is fine, but you simply cannot neglect the core tennis fans and price them out, because it does have an impact on the audience vibe, and you can feel it, the lack of atmosphere, even for me watching from home. Did you enjoy this year's U.S. Open and disagree with me about it being mid, or do you feel the same and thought that definitely it was a disappointment? Leave your thoughts in the comment section below and subscribe and click the notification bell so you know notified whenever I post more tennis content. And with that, my 2024 US Open coverage has come to a close. 17 videos in like 17 days was a lot, but y'all's support made it all worth it. So thank you all so much for watching and for your support. And I cannot wait for y'all to see the greater things that are to come from me and this channel. So signing off, I won't be gone for long. I'll be back pretty soon, actually. This is Christian for Christian's Court. Bye, y'all.